Hello, my name's Daniel Winstanley and I would describe myself as an integrative LGBTQ affirmative therapist. My training covers humanistic, person-centred, psychodynamic, cognitive behavioural and other approaches, and since qualifying I've also developed an interest in compassion-focused therapy and trauma-focused therapy, among others. So working integratively can be really freeing and very pragmatic because it allows you to create a new therapy for each client based on their goals, their preferences, their processing style and what the problem that they're bringing to therapy is. However, it's really important to have some sort of anchor to avoid kind of what you might call haphazard eclecticism, so the therapeutic equivalent of throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks, which could be confusing for you and confusing for the client as well. So in order to avoid this and to stay grounded, I think you need an overarching way of looking at the therapeutic process so you can use interventions mindfully and intentionally. And in my case, the core model is Clarkson's 5 relationship framework. Clarkson described her model as a sort of lens or viewfinder for looking at the therapeutic process. So it's a way of describing how the therapeutic encounter operates on a number of levels. So for example, while I might be contracting with a client to work in a cognitive behavioural style, I would also be holding in mind what was happening in the transference counter-transference aspect of the relationship. I find the 5 relationship framework can be helpful in terms of assessment and formulation, as well as when I'm reflecting on the client. Working integratively can also be challenging, particularly at first, because there's no home base there. There isn't that sort of secure sense of identity when you say I'm a psychodynamic therapist or I'm a person-centered therapist. But likewise, I think as I've grown in confidence after qualifying, I think the framework sort of functions as a touchstone, so I can keep growing as a practitioner and learning about new approaches and continue to sort of incorporate and integrate as I go along without losing my way too much. As I mentioned at the beginning, I would also describe myself as an LGBTQ affirmative therapist. So I would just say that, like any anti-oppressive standpoint, that's a sort of statement of intent rather than a fixed position, and I'm always sort of seeking to grow and learn and do therapy in ways that are inclusive and empowering for the spectrum of people within the LGBTQ plus community. Although I have a background in LGBTQ plus support work, I didn't market myself as an LGBTQ plus therapist in the first place. But my commitment to LGBTQ plus affirmative therapy was sort of solidified when I heard clients talking about maybe not feeling understood or heard, or having to educate their therapist, or even in some cases sort of having their identities pathologized or dismissed. And I think as a member of that community myself, I know we're very sensitive to learning that something is off limits and sort of holding back aspects of identity in therapy, so it's really important to be careful. Also, for me, striving to LGBTQ plus affirmative involves making an active commitment to developing my understanding of diverse sexualities and gender identities and being open to talking about this in my therapeutic work. If my clients ask, I'm happy to acknowledge that I'm a gay man and also be responsible for sort of what, how that impacts okay, so just because I'm a gay man, it doesn't mean that I understand the experience of other people within the LGBTQ plus umbrella. And so I'm curious about the unique experiences that people have, as well as the differences between me and my clients, and how these can be valued and explored. So I believe that being an LGBTQ plus affirmative therapist requires a structural understanding of society and how intersectional identities and marginalisation impacts people's experiences. In order to support people effectively, I have to educate myself not just about LGBTQ phobia and internalised LGBTQ phobia, but also about racism, ableism, sexism, and other forms of oppression. And I really don't feel that counselling training generally covers this in sufficient depth. Working with LGBTQ plus clients has helped me to appreciate the myriad ways in which people in our community survive and thrive. So while it can be painful at times, and particularly when it touches on areas of my own experience of shame and exclusion, also gives me a great deal of respect. And that also means that when I encounter people's coping mechanisms in therapy, I really try and be respectful and gentle and grateful for how they've helped the client to protect themselves in the past. Anyway, that was a little explanation of my way of working.